I'm your chair talk host Nemanja, and this is retrospective from the last week episode with Dr. Nico.
So the idea is that first to match empathy scores or empathy levels or empathy neural footprint with specific jobs. Because there are job positions that require you to have extremely strong empathy when you cry to cry, but there are others that do not and requires you to have lower emotional empathy. So our approach is there is no absolute good or bad. Let's see what your job requires you to be and make sure that your empathy level, so the one is matching. The other though is improving, because what is wonderful about the brain is, maybe you've heard it, neuroplasticity. And we understand that the brain actually can change quite fast, faster than what we thought that personality can change. And this is the big hope message that neuroscience is bringing. So we measure leaders, we try to match their brain footprint with jobs, but we're also helping them to change, to reinforce some aspects and maybe weaken others so they can become better in life, in what they want to achieve.
This is Chair, place where we discuss innovations. Inventors dreams about creating new Facebook, new Google, new Amazon, and that's a great goal. But in this path to pursue this goal, they usually can make mistakes because they are not listening their customers, they're just looking at their products. So on this subject, I have a great pleasure to welcome Pavle Krivokuća, managing partner at Impact Hub Belgrade. He found himself working in startups since 2014 and overseen more than 400 different startups, their rise and fall. And because of this experience, he's a perfect guy to talk about this today. So Pavle, welcome to Chair.
Thank you for having me.
At the beginning, I want to start with a personal question and ask you how you end up in this path of guiding the startups.
So that's an interesting one. So I've been working since, I don't know, my 12th or 13th year, and I was quite active in youth activism at the time. So it was my high school. I was, by incident, like I was working a lot with different projects and programs for youth, and I started developing it. And because I'm coming from Ivanjica, for those of you who don't know, a small town in Western Serbia, everybody has raspberries, so everybody's kind of, picking raspberries as a summer job and earning money like that. And I was like, my family doesn't have raspberries. They're not particularly fond of it as a way of additional income. And I was thinking, okay, what can I do? So by incident, I started finding myself writing different projects and programs for youth activism and earning money. And I started earning money better than my friends who were picking raspberries for a couple of months' time. It's like, this, this life there's something in this, yeah. And when I moved to university, I already had like 4 years of project development experience, and I started working as a consultant in a very, I would say, young age at the time, helping, companies and NGOs and, big and small systems to kind of apply for different kind of funds and develop project cycles, the whole thing. And quite, I would say, fast, like in a year or two time, I was fed up with it. Like the life of a consultant was not one for me, and I've seen the corporate lifestyle as well, and I was like, okay, not my cup of tea. don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And I actually founded my own startup. It was like kind of logical thing to do. I was studying IT back then, and I was like, okay, I have a couple of friends from the university, and let's do a startup. So we got in the first incubator in city, and yada. We failed, of course, as all people do with their first with their first startups. But I quite like the approach and the whole lean in kind of way of thinking and the philosophy, kind of testing and applying what you learn and kind of moving faster to things rather than developing a complex projects nobody's gonna care about in a couple of years' time when it start to be implemented. And that's by incident how I find myself actually meeting Impact Hub founders, Impact Hub Belgrade founders, and joined the team prior to the start because I was had that some experience working with startups, had a failed startup, did here and there a consultancy on business model canvas, developing a business model behind that, and then I started working as a part of Impact Hub. and then kind of just accelerated the whole thing of me living the lean way of kind of thinking and also approaching different kind of problems that we tackle in a business life, but also like in a personal life. So it's kind of that's how I ended up in the whole thing. Yeah.
So before we move to the startups itself, I want to ask you a question regarding difference, and that's our subject today here.
Yeah.
Difference between innovation and innovations. They exist separately.
Yeah.
And to what extent they thrive on each other? I want you to elaborate on that a bit.
So I would say there are two perspectives. So by default, people like to have that romantic view of innovations, like, oh, we're gonna make a next big thing, whatever the big thing might be. Is it the next Facebook, next Google, or next telephone, or whatever? And people love to create things that are gonna make impact to other people, life, environment speaking, society speaking, whatever. But the thing is, those innovations are so rare. Like, it's super hard to find something completely new and different that somebody hasn't already thought about it.
In specific moment.
Yeah. And if you think about it, it's kind of logical, because if you take there's 7 billion people on the planet currently, and that we pretty much have the same hardware. So we have a similar mind, minds and capabilities of minds, to a certain extent, like plus and minuses. People already thought of a bunch of different things already. So, and they tested it out and so it's quite connected to the proper timing. So if you look mobile technology, for instance, and everybody has a mobile phone today, but mobile phone technology is 40 years old. So it started in the 80s, and it started as a geek side project of a bunch of engineers. And then it went on for 10 years like that, before it becoming a posh thing to have in the 90s, with the yuppies. They're installing their first mobile phone in the cars and speaking, with their brokers or, lawyers with their high-paying
just to
clients.
be seen by speaking.
Yeah, but having that big brick in your hand and an antenna sticking out of your car. But the mass market mobile phones came in the third decade of mobile phone technology. So even though the inventor of mobile phone technology had the big innovation, they didn't have the commercial breakthrough till much later on there. So by default, a bunch of things that we call innovations are actually inventions. So using the existing either technology or solution or specific kind of, I would say, physical product in a different way. So it's if you look at Airbnb, for instance, if you take a look at them, they had an innovation on the level they approached the same problem in a I would say a bit different manner. But if you kind of dissect it, it's, they didn't, create a completely different platform and a new language for coding it. They used the existing ones. They did a build up on existing models. So you already had people posting, space rental and room rentals on Craigslist, on, Reddit, on different kind of platforms back in the day, offering that. They just said, okay, there is this opportunity that we can solve by providing a dedicated place for people to rent out their home or room or whatever when they are not there, or if they have an added space. That's it. So I would say by definition, it's not innovation as per se, but it did impact a whole bunch of people, and we all know how big Airbnb today is, or Uber, or Facebook, or any different network. People often forget, the MySpaces and all the other social networks prior to the Facebook, because they existed. They just didn't make the kind of proper formula to become so mass marketed, so popular, and commercially successful, so they become today. So by default, I would say that the space for entrepreneurs, the space for innovators, is in that actually finding that invention spaces, because that can make a drastic differences. Either you're going to make it or break it down the line, because for the sake of innovation, you can always innovate. You can always find a new way to make a cup. But
it will still be a cup.
It will still be a cup, and it's fine. If it's giving it any value, if it's a recyclable cup or a cup made of, coffee beans or whatever, but it's still a cup serving certain function and then giving some additional value. But yeah, you need to kind of balance out different aspects of it and understand the market on the other end. So what can actually be made happen in this time and space that we currently have.
Let's apply this analysis on your experience
Yeah.
and the experience with the startup that you worked. It's more than a 400 right now. Give me some examples that we can use for this analysis.
Yeah. So a short intro to that is, I would say, it applies to the general, I would say, population of the world, but I would say people in Balkans have a different, like a twist on it. Like when we are, as I said, everybody likes to innovate. So when we get connected to that big idea, everybody's, oh, that's my baby. I really want to make it, happen and whatever. So what we've seen is and the short stories I'm going to share, what we've seen is that journey of actually people understanding and feeling on their skin that context of actually finding themselves working on a specific invention rather than a complex innovation. So one of my, I would say, definitely favorite and I would say oldest cases that we have, since we've been working with founder Nikita for 6 years now, and we're following him on and supporting him on different journeys. So he started off in 2015, and the platform was called Zeleno. So it was basically the first platform for people to order and buy organic food in Serbia. So they didn't exist before in that case. You have people trying to sell it on small Facebook groups or by, putting a stand near supermarkets or whatever, trying to offer their food. But for small organic food producers back in the day, there was no kind of one-stop shop for them to help to distribute their product. So he built that. He built the first e-commerce for buying organic food in Serbia. So what happened there, he raised some investments, he hit traction. He had, I think at one point, 50 weekly users buying, on Belgrade alone from him. And the platform worked you had, 20, 30, 40 different organic producers. You pick, your products, add them to the cart. They would make a tour on Thursday, collect all the things, and on Friday it would be delivered to your doorstep with everything that you order. He figured out a bunch of, along the way, logistical problems with that. And him building a system, he was on I would say, on a front of the customer's bad feedback of the specific products.
Okay.
Which are not intentional, but if I had my cheese that I ordered, but the cheese wasn't properly packed and it's actually went bad in the transportation because it was not bad packed, they wouldn't complain to the producer, but rather to Zeleno as a platform. So Nikita, along the way, he figured that he would like to pivot from that. There were some logistical problems that he just didn't feel personally invited to solve, or they were too big to solve at that point in time because the market was still super young, super small. So what he did, he pivoted from that because he's seen a very interesting point, which is kind of ironic. He was packing all the organic food there in the styrofoam boxes, which is, stupid, I would say.
You're selling organic in something that's completely
non-organic. So what he said, this is super crazy, but we need a different kind of, why don't we offer something different on the market? And he learned that a bunch of sheep wool that is being actually produced here is second or third quality. So it's not good for kind of, your attire or jumpers or whatever you are building from it, but rather it's usually being thrown away or burned because nobody's buying that up. So he figured out a way to buy that wool that is just going away and being wasted away, and the wool is amazing thermal material, and he started building kind of material out of it, like pressed foam that had better thermal properties than the styrofoam, and it was actually cheaper. So he started building it in wooden boxes with the foam, and then he pivoted from that to the only kind of wool kind of fillings. And he's now selling to Austrian Post. He raised a bunch of investment. He has his manufacturing plant here near Belgrade, and he's collecting that all wasted wool and buying it out from the farms and putting it in the end product. So he shifted from e-commerce in food to logistics supply chain, specifically for kind of sustainable logistics and supply chain.
Incredible, yeah.
Yeah, and he had a whole, but he's learning. He had, I think, 4 or 5 different big pivots. And the pivots were different companies along the way, testing it out until he found something that really is kind of connecting to the market, but also has a big buyer to it and is connected to the kind of big problem because the styrofoam has a very limited kind of lifespan and it's also kind of super problematic because it ends up in, as a microplastics in, oceans and yada. So, and he completely kind of figured out a new way to solve it, but not coming, hey, how can we solve this big logistic issues and let's do like this, but rather from listening his customers and seeing what's happening in practice, and then finding his niche there so he can kind of jump there and solve that problem. So yeah, that's one of the stories. Additional one, again, interesting, would be a story of Sportifico. Again, completely different industry, completely different thing. So they started off as a local startup building a social network for professional athletes. So different kind of athletes, football players, basketball players, whatnot. They had quite nice, couple of thousands of users, of professional profiles built up there, with all the juicy logistics interesting for potential coaches or recruiting agents or whatever. And they figure out that a bunch of their users, quite active on the platform, were actually female soccer players, professional female soccer players. And they understood that at one point they were gathering a huge chunk of complete total global number of female soccer players. And they were like, why is this happening? Like, why are they coming in such a big number to our platform? And actually figure out there is no dedicated platform for female football/soccer players to actually come and build their profiles, build their visibility. They're using either regular social media or all channels to kind of build up their profiles, and they did a complete pivot, and now they're pivoting towards building a completely dedicated platform for female soccer players to actually provide them the voice and a platform to raise awareness of the specific sports, but more importantly of the fairness of the wages, on kind of promoting the whole sport to young girls, yada. And they were able to build nice partnerships with big sporting companies from there, and they have the completely big perspective and potential of that untapped market, because nobody was doing that. But then again, they didn't come from saying, oh, let's build something amazing for female soccer players, but rather seeing that from practice as a niche they can kind of tackle and go to. So yeah, bottom line is kind of understanding the opportunity, but I would say it's quite important to understand it through practicing it on a kind of daily basis, as what are our customers telling us, what is the market telling us, and coming back with that feedback to actually build the solution they are looking for. And I would say that's the biggest kind of switch in the mindset. Like, you're not building the solution, you're trying to solve the problem, and then build whatever the solution you want to be.
It's not about the technology or platform.
Yeah.
It's about solving that problem.
Yeah. Because the technology, it's like art per art. You can always build it. You can always innovate with the new technology.
Especially lately with all the technology that are rising.
But it's quite hard to kind of find the usable cases for it right away. You need time to kind of let it breathe and because it's the same story with the blockchain. It's the technology to build it existed, and the theoretical framework existed for a couple of decades. But it needed time and needed the community to stand behind and say, this is an amazing thing to do, let's do it and test it out together and see what happens. And now it's becoming a regular part of our lives. So yeah, it comes also to the point of it being mature enough, but also you finding a smart way to use it in a proper manner to solve somebody's problem in a proper manner.
So you gave me those two great examples. But I want to ask you from the different perspective, because usually goal for the young entrepreneurs, for innovators, can sometimes be to push their invention to merge with some big corporation. What do you think about that? Can you share with me pros and cons for this?
So definitely, I think it's one way to do it. It's a natural thing to do, but maybe a step before is debunking the perspective. So if we're speaking about the startup growth model, you have generally like two, I wouldn't say opposing, but two approaches. You can build your business. You can kind of mainstream your innovation into kind of being. So first one, it's a regular business. So in a regular business, what you do, you basically say, hey, we have this idea, we're approaching this market, yada, yada, yada. and we need an investment for it. Usually you need one round of investment to make it happen, and then you're looking for profitability in like 1.5 years, 2 years tops usually. And then you achieve certain market and you have a steady, healthy growth rate annually, 10-15%, not more than that, because you're either overscaling and then you cannot follow with the quality and you have a completely different set of problems. So that's I would say a regular business model, give or take a couple of factors. The startup model, and then not speaking about people who started up, because quite often people say, oh, we are a startup because we just started up. No, it's not a startup. Startup model is connected. You are solving, again, specific problem to specific audience market, yada, yada, yada. And you say there is a big global potential to be served with a relatively small team. Again, classic example of a startup is Instagram. When it was acquired by Facebook, it had 70-something employees, serving 30-something million people on Instagram, and they were acquired for some billions of dollars. Yeah. So that's a successful...
15, 16,
something like that. Some crazy amount. The logic behind that was the startups very rarely become profitable, but they are serving a specific need for a bunch of people, through a digital platform, app, community, whatever. And the potential behind it is seen by somebody big. It can be a big corporation. So now these days, big buyers of startups are Amazon, Google, Facebook, whatever. Like Amazon is buying I think something like 10 or 20 startups a day, something like that. So, but the logic there is, of course you can get acquired and you are building a startup to be bought by somebody big down the line. What startups usually make as a mistake, they do the acquisition or do the sales of their business concept, IP, whatever, too early. And they sell it for a couple of thousands of euros or tens of thousands of euros early stage on, because they didn't kind of build that, but somebody came in and said, oh, this is amazing, we really need this, we like to invest that, and they would take 20, 30, 50% of your startup and you become uninvestable in later stages. And we've seen those examples on the market, like people jumping in, they found a big, even corporate investors, they would, say, yeah, amazing, we love the service, build it for us, and then when you start approaching different customers, they figure out, oh, you build a perfect solution for one big guy, and it's not relevant, it's at that point, you just build internally a super nice project that is adding value to a bank or to a company.
And that's it.
And that's it. And you're done there. So usually, if you're speaking about the acquisitions and the big kind of startup exits, it's down the line. You raised a couple of rounds in investments, you're serving a relatively big global market, and somebody big is gonna buy you for big money, And there were examples like that happening here, like MVP and GoDaddy and stuff like that. So those things happen. But if you look at those startups, they were building a quite big user base. They were had really nice traction. They had even hundreds of employees prior to actually getting bought by somebody big. And that's, I would say, the startups make the mistake. They jump into making a partner of or selling a piece of their business to a big player early on, and they by default fade out. They become a really nice and cheaply bought internal project of a company that is being bought by a couple of hundred of thousands of euros, which is nothing for big players. And there, yeah, fine, we did some innovation, we did some value add, and that's it. And usually founders don't see the bigger perspective. So they need to learn how to play that game of actually building your profile down the line. So you are buying and building it for somebody big and some big exit down the line. So whoever it is, you say, oh, we are now, trying to build a completely different, let's say, social network for sportists or female soccer players. So who's your buyer? Is it a Nike or Adidas or something like that? But down the line, like you're speaking 3, 5, 7 years timeline.
Exactly.
So you're building from grounds up the numbers, the indicators, the cases, so that somebody big can acquire down the line. But that's the I would say the key point there, because it's a natural thing to do as a startup. Otherwise, if you're not going towards that big exit, option is to go for a small exit, the case that I mentioned, or you pivot and go to the digital business. So you can become a really nice digital business that earns quite nice profit and margins, but then you're stabilizing, you have a smaller number of clients, you have a limited number of team members, so you're locking up your margins, you are locking up your market, and that's it. You are not coming or spreading big to different niches, to different markets, whatever is happening there. So yeah, you're kind of just thinking about who's gonna be interested in buying that, and how can we build it from grounds up in that manner so it's buyable, but somebody big down the line. Otherwise, you're just kind of playing by the ear and see what happens, which is, again, fine strategy. It can be good because quite often, even the biggest kind of business gurus don't know where the market is going to go or what's going to happen. But then you need to kind of be checking on your pulse each now and then and saying, what are we doing and why are we doing that? And we've seen along the years a number of startups actually breaking out, not because only they had bad product or bad market fit. They did have good potential and good growth, but the founders in between themselves had different whys of where are we going. And somebody wanted to be sold to a local corporation in 6 months and be done with it. Somebody wanted to go and drive the big growth in a couple of years' time, and somebody wanted just to have a nice service digital business which is making money, making profit, and that's it. And it changes along the way between the founders. So the communication, I would say, there is key, but also kind of understanding the market reality, what's in house and where. So what can you expect of? Because for a startup, it's quite hard to say, oh, we're gonna be the next Instagram. There's tens of thousands of startups each year saying they're going to be the next
exactly
Instagram.
The same thing.
So don't be the next Instagram. Be the next solving that very specific niche problem in a different and a quality and a cool way for your users, and find the big guy or the big guys or the whatever who have that problem or whose audience have that problem. So solve those kind of problems in a proper way, and then you'll be able to kind of buy it. Because like the Instagrams of the world, they're outdated. It's 2010 thing to do.
Yeah.
Like you don't build a new Instagram in 2021.
It's too late now.
It's too late now. Yeah.
You gave me so many good examples of pivoting, and I like that because we pivoted our talk today from invention and innovations to startups. And let's finish with this.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you regarding your opinion from your experience. You're like 6 years in this ecosystem, right? 6-7 years, something like that. What is your perspective, especially for the region, Southeast Europe here, where we are now, and we are talking about the ecosystem, of course, where we are now and where we are going to be in 5 or 10 years from now?
Yeah. So maybe also then wrapping up from the first part of the conversation and just connecting it back to it. So we have a really cool and great engineering talent. That's a known, I would say, fact now on the market. And people see that. People from abroad, investors from abroad, the market is gaining traction and potential. And there are more and more investors coming in, looking for a solid team they can build on. The thing is, we all collectively need more business development insight and more business development experience to make these kind of deals, and people don't know that. They the engineers who build amazing innovations are not able to transfer it in a usable inventions that can be usable, for those buyers, for their customers, for those markets, and grow it in a sustainable fashion. So the thing is, like the ecosystem is gaining traction. There are more and more investors, and there is more and more money coming in the market. The trick is not even in the money, but finding the proper money and a proper partner to grow your idea to the next level with that bigger perspective. And I would say the risk taking, I would say it kind of is getting a better and better each year. Like more and more people are trying and doing and testing and seeing what happens. What we still lack are those big, I would say, successes on the whole market level. Like things are happening, people had some exits, things are moving, stuff is happening, but we still need some big stories like, Estonia had Skype, or whatever, somebody big who's gonna break the ice and say this is the new big success. But otherwise than that, I think the whole ecosystem is giving many opportunities now, and you can actually find a bunch of people, organizations, VCs, angel investors, stuff like that, to kind of help you grow in a proper manner. It's just the sense of you understanding what you need and navigating through that complex landscape and knowing where you are going from that point on.
Pavle, thank you so much for this conversation today. I enjoyed it a lot. Hope you did too.
Thank you for inviting me.
And
sure.
for you out there, if you liked it, subscribe, and see you next Thursday when we talk about some new innovations.
Thank you.